We start out with a slab. I'm rolling on a board covered in canvas so that the clay will not stick when I roll it out. And you'll see I'm using these 2 sticks here with the same width. That way I don't roll my clay out too thin. And I'm turning it constantly so it gets rolled in lots of different directions. Constantly turning it. We're getting closer and closer to the width of the wooden side rails. All right, now we should have a good even thickness. The clay slab is going to be just as thick as these wooden pieces here. I am going to start with the bowl, and the bowl is matching cutout piece. Once I have my piece cut out, I'm just going to use one of these little bamboo skewers. It's good to use a wooden tool to cut this out when you're using a canvas, because if you use something sharp, you're going to cut holes in your canvas. Got that pulled aside. Then I like to use the scraps from the side to make the coils that we end up using when we do the foot. Cut out some chunks there. Smush it down a little. I'll show you a neat trick for getting a flat coil. I mean, not flat coil, a good coil. Is use a straight edge or a ruler to help you roll the coil. That way, instead of each of your fingers pressing down, you have a more even coil because you're dispersing your weight across the flat surface. So this is where you want to use your rib to gently try not to distort the circle. So you have to kind of press gently here. Just gently compress the clay. And you're also rubbing out, using this compression technique, you're also rubbing out the pattern from the canvas. So you get a much smoother surface. Then what I want to do is I want to go all the way across in one direction and then turn and go the other direction. Oops. Don't let the rib get away from you. You really got to hold on to it. Then once you've compressed it on one side, you want to flip it over and compress it the exact same way on the other side. And I like to stay within the borders of the circle, not reach the edge there, and then in the end just kind of swirl it around. And you'll know that you've compressed it enough if you've gotten rid of the canvas. That canvas texture, once it's all smooth, now we're going to use the foam, and then you just swirl it around. Now, sometimes you don't get it perfectly centered. You see there's a lot more on this side than on this side down here. This is where we flip it over, give it a little pat, and then we're going to put it on the banding wheel to trim it. And again, I'm going to use my little bamboo skewer because it won't leave deep lines on my mold. All right, now I'm gonna use my bamboo skewer to just cut off the excess here. That will just peel right off. So you just want to get all the pieces that would fold over, right? You just want them to all be level. Then we're going to flip this over, put it in the center of the banding wheel, and I like to use these little circles to find the center. Then just turn it with your hands, patting down as you go. You'll get that perfect round bowl shape as it hugs the mold with every little pat. Then you're just going to take the skewer, put it about a finger width above the edge, hold it still, and turn the banding wheel. Don't move your hand at all. Try and keep it completely still, and it should match right back up with your first cut. You might have to go around a few more times depending on how thin the edges are, but you want to get it to where it's sliding against the plaster mold. It's about that deep. Then it peels right off in a couple pieces sometimes. These scraps will be used to make more coils for the foot of the next piece. Always keep your scraps wrapped up. Okay, now if you want, you can give it another few little hugs. Then we're going to use the banding wheel to compress the clay into the shape. It'll also smooth away the texture if you had nails or a ring or something that was pressing into it, or if you accidentally nicked it with the tool at one point. This is a great time to smooth everything out. And you just want to use gentle but consistent pressure. This can also be done on a pottery wheel and it will be a lot faster, but it's more important to center. Using a banding wheel, the centering doesn't have to be quite so precise. This will also be another instance of compressing the clay. We're compressing it into this shape. Notice how now I'm using the full side of the rib and I am just dragging it along, and I pulled it off the center there. That doesn't really matter as much when you're on a banding wheel. So I want to press enough that I'm touching the clay, but not so much that I push the bowl off the banding wheel, because that's totally possible. And if you stop, you always want to swoop off of it, because if you stop, you'll end up with a little mark that you'll have to go over again. And you can also just keep it down and spin the band wheel and just kind of slowly move it. Another cool trick of the band wheel, and this time we want it to be a little better centered, so we're going to hold the tool here, and then again we're going to let the banding wheel do all the work. Touch the clay and then just spin around and try not to move. See, I wiggled a little there, but got it on the second run. So this is where the foot is going to go. And this is the coil we're going to use. So first we want to figure out how much of that coil we're going to need, because we're not going to need all of it. This is like a whole snake. We're going to pinch off about how much we think we're going to use. Then we're going to lay it flat, and we're going to use this same wooden tool we've been using, the same little bamboo skewer, and we're going to do little scores all along it. You can also use a fork if you're a little more impatient, and that'll get done a lot quicker. And then we're going to move over to the pot, and we're going to score right on top of that line as we turn the band wheel. Then you're basically just scoring the same spot over and over again with one hand, but the band wheel is moving it around the pot. So now that we've got score here and score here, we're going to add slip, and when we connect them, they're kind of going to zip together. So slip is basically liquid clay but you apply with a paintbrush and it kind of glues the two pieces together. I like to use the water from throwing on the wheel, and I also like to add a little bit of vinegar to it because that will help it glue the pieces together better, and it will also help it to not grow as moldy and smelly. So we're just going to take this and we're going to go all the way around. So we want a nice amount of slip. We want it to get in all the creases and cracks. Then we're going to do the same thing on this scored side. All right, now we're going to take one end, scratch side down, you're going to press it down, and then you're just going to turn the band wheel and just keep the coil on top of the scratch marks and make sure they're zipping together until you get all the way to the end. I want you to end up with a little snake, its little head up, right? Because that's the part that we're going to cut off, right? And that makes it so that this spot really got squished down and there isn't a gap where they met. So now, once you've got it pretty well squished down, now we're going to get a wet sponge, wring it out so that it's just nice and damp. And we're going to gently go around and around and around. And I'm pressing down on the sides, but I'm not really pressing down on the top because that would flatten. And we don't want to flatten. We want to make sure that it stays up. So I've got 2 fingers. And you notice as I go round and round and round, it's getting more round. It's getting more symmetrical. And it's got a nice, perfect edge. Now sometimes this can squish out a little bit on the edge here. You see how it did that? But it can be easily smoothed with the other side of the sponge. And you can actually go all the way down the bowl with this technique, and you can use the sponge. Like, let's say you didn't get all the little nicks and scratches out that first time. This is yet another opportunity to compress and smooth. Then you can clean up the inside a little bit. And now we have a nice little foot. You can also use the sponge to sweep along the edge to get that to be a little bit of a softer edge. But don't worry too much about perfecting the edge right now, because we can come back to this when it has firmed up a little bit. The plaster actually sucks moisture out of the clay, and this will dry a lot quicker than a throne plate would. One, because it started out with a slab that didn't have a lot of water added to it to make it into a bowl. And 2, because it's sitting on this plaster mold. So the inside part of this bowl is already firming up just from being in contact with the plaster. Now the reason I had you cut away a finger's length down is because that's how you can pull it off of the either wheel head or banding. That way it's easier to take off. Now we're going to set this one aside and move on to the plate. One of the nice things about using a plaster mold is how easy it is to press a stamp into it because it has all the support of the plaster mold. Now, to make sure that the foot is even and the bowl will be level, I like to put a piece of wood on top, gently press down, slide it off the wheel, hand on top of the wood, hand on bottom of the plaster, flip her around, and it's going to dry with the board on the bottom and the weight of the plaster gently settling it down into an even bottom. Next up, we're gonna do a little plate. I'm gonna be using this one this time. So let's roll out that slab. And we're back to rolling. It's good to just let it only roll out a little bit each flip. Like you don't have to go much bigger than that before you flip it around. Now I've done it twice in this direction. So we don't want it all going the same direction. We want it stretched evenly in every direction. So we're gonna flip it and turn it. Still have our little sticks here as a guide so it doesn't get too thin. Now the thinner it gets, the easier it is to roll because you're pressing down less clay. So now I'm gonna take it and twist it this direction, going diagonally. I'm gonna switch it around diagonally this way, bring these out a little bit if you need to, but they can only go as far as what you're using to roll with. Let's make sure we have one last pass so that we know it's even all the way across. Same width as this. We're going to take our form and use that same tool to cut around. Pull this off. You can grab a little slice out of this extra bit and make a new coil. Okay, now that I have this, we're going to go right back to the rib. And I'm doing it enough to smooth the pattern, but not enough to make an indent. You don't want to squish it too hard. Remember, you want to keep it in a circle. And you don't want to make marks. You want to smooth out the canvas marks. Then we flip it. We do the same thing. See, my nail got it a little bit. Don't worry about if your nail gets it because you can just smooth that. So I'm going all the way down. And notice my first pass, I'm not pressing hard enough for it to totally get rid of the pattern. But when I go across ways, the pattern completely disappears and it becomes a shiny, smooth piece of clay. And that's a good indicator that you've pressed enough that you're compressing the clay. I like to go around the edges, get those nice and compressed, get all that texture gone. And if you're getting little marks like that, it's because you aren't floating off. Just lift up and away as you go without too much pressure. Too much pressure and you get those drag marks, right? So it does take practice to be able to really easily smooth out a clay slab. And sometimes you can't get it perfectly smooth, and that's okay. So now that we've got this piece here, we're gonna move our slab and have it smooth side up right in our nice foam part. I'm gonna grab our mold, have it face down, try and line it up as best you can to be right in the center of that clay, and then press down and swirl around. Down, up, down, side, side, in a big circle. Now you don't want to press too hard, you don't want to snap the mold in half, but you want to press enough that the clay is being pressed into. It's kind of like I'm doing CPR. Then the clay will have molded to the shape. And again, you can put it down again, you can turn it, give it little pats. Now we've got it back on the band wheel. Then we're gonna go in again with the rib, and we're gonna compress, try not to move the piece. You're gonna compress to get rid of that pattern again. Because remember, we put the smooth side down on the mold, so the outside still has that canvas pattern. And we want to, see, even I push too hard sometimes. So you want to very gently just drag it across. You really don't have to put a lot of pressure. Whatever you do, just make sure you're going multiple directions with the smoothing. The longer the motion, the smoother you can get it. So if you're doing little tiny pats, you're probably gonna make more indents, but if you have the rib touching the piece as often as possible and moving the entire time, you get it a lot smoother. Then we're gonna do same as we did last time, where we're gonna find about a finger's width length. Don't stick the tool in like straight in. You kind of want it to go into the direction that you're spinning. So if I just hold it right there and I spin around it, I'm gonna get that indent. And if I very slowly go around again with just a little bit more pressure, and don't worry if you don't always go through the same exact lines. It's easy for it to get off center, but if you slow down, you can carve through that channel you created to get all the way to the plaster. Once you've gotten all the way to the plaster, this will just come right off. So now you've got just a little edge for your plate, but there's a finger width's length so you can still move the mold around. You can press down the rim a little bit if it flared out a tiny bit from being trimmed. And this time, instead of being like this big of an area, we want the plate to have a nice wide foot to support the whole plate. So I would say find where the edge goes downward and be no more than a finger's width inside of that, because you don't want too much of an overhang for your plate. So we're just gonna rest our tool on the clay while spinning, and it's gonna create. So don't worry if that happens. You can always smooth that out later, right? So that's basically where the foot's gonna go. So I'm gonna scratch through that. You wanna make sure that your little scratches are very close together. Don't be doing this. This is not gonna attach anything. That is not what a zipper looks like. Zipper has lots of little teeth all close next to each other. No gaps, no cavities. Go back if you need to. If there's like a gap, you can always go back and add a little bit more scratch. Then I'm gonna take that coil we made, and uh-oh, it doesn't make it all the way around. Easy, easy fix for that. I'm gonna grab our ruler again, and also a flat wooden board works well. Anything where you can put even pressure on the coil as you press it. And you have to press gently because you don't want to squish the coil flat. But as you roll it, it's gonna get a little bit longer. Then you can kind of slap its belly while gently tugging. And I know it doesn't look like it's changed shape all that significantly, but if you put it on here, you'll notice that now it fits. So you really didn't have to roll it that much skinnier in order for it to fit. So now we've got this piece. We know it's long enough. I'm gonna get that same tool again, and we're gonna scratch, scratch, scratch. And this is gonna feel like it takes forever. Because again, it has to look like a zipper, so all the marks have to be super close together. They can't be out like this. This will not do anything. They have to be like this. And sometimes if it's a long coil, you have to hold it still as you go. So you're gonna wanna scratch it all the way to the end, right? Make sure there's no gaps. All the lines are deep enough. Now we add the slip. I like to kind of blob it on rather than paint it on because I don't want to wipe away any slip. I want to just deposit. So blot, 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 blot. Tap, tap, tap. You want all of these little lines to be filled with slip. You don't want any of them to be open because that will create an air bubble, and that's not what you want. You want a glued zipper. This is how you make a glued zipper. You can do the same thing here. Dun, 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 dun. I'm just going back over and splatting it so I know that it got all the way in all those cracks. And we're gonna bring this bad boy over. And I like to always start at one end. Get it right in the center of those crosses. Cross hatching is what we will sometimes call it. And we're gonna press it down. And again, do not worry if you aren't pressing it down into a perfect circle. Just stay on top of the scratchy parts. Make sure that the wet scratch part is touching the wet scratch part. Don't let it twist up like this on you because you don't want the flat part going into the zipper. That's not how zippers work. They both need teeth. Teeth meeting teeth. And as you press it, you might notice, wait a minute, we barely had enough last time. How did this happen? Well, every time you pressed it, you were extending the length just a tiny bit, but that's fine because remember, we want our happy little snake on top, right? So you can press his belly all the way down so that it's completely sealed. There's no hole where they meet. Then you just pinch his little head off. And don't worry about this little bump. If you didn't pinch it quite clean and there's a little bump, you can just smooth that out. Because remember, the sponge dipped in water is what we're gonna use to smooth this. And I'm just gonna put 2 fingers on either side of the sponge. And I like to use my thumb to hold on to the sponge. 2 fingers either side of the sponge. And we're just moving in a circle. And you'll see the indent on the outside where my finger's pressing in. So I'm not pressing in that hard. I'm just kind of trying to keep it steady. But with every single turn, this is gonna get more and more perfectly round and more the same size all the way around. This is the head, so there's still a little bit of bump here, but if you keep going, it's eventually gonna all be the same size. Now you wanna be careful that you aren't pushing down so hard that it's creating an indent on the side, because you can press down and make that part of the clay super thin between your finger and the plaster if you press too hard. So you wanna be gentle enough, you wanna be firm enough that it's pressing the coil down, but gentle enough that it's not denting the clay. And when you do this on a wheel, it's a lot faster. And remember, we're not trying for perfect. We're just trying to make it exist. No matter how imperfect it is, it's still gonna be a plate, and it's gonna do all the things that a plate does, even if it's not perfect. Even if there's a little nail mark or a little swipe of the sponge, or it's not perfectly even. It's still gonna exist, and it didn't exist before. So that's my little bit of pottery wisdom. Look at the difference. It's so much more smooth and so much more attached. We didn't have to individually attach each little inch. You can swipe along by pressing down and it'll attach everything. And then you can do the same thing on the edge here to make this edge a little more smooth. At this point, we're done with the plate. Okay, now that it's nice and smooth, we're gonna use our finger, just one finger, because we have that room on the side of the mold there, right? One finger's width. You're gonna use that to slide it off. Place the wooden bat or wood over it, hands on either side, flip it round. This is what it looks like. There's the profile. Flip it around like this, and we will let it dry like this. All right, now we are ready for the cup. The cup is gonna be just a little bit different, but still pretty quick and easy. Once again, we're gonna start by rolling out our slabs. This, of course, would be immensely quicker with a slab roller. But slab rollers are really big and really expensive. Little boards on either side are a much, much cheaper option. So this time, we're gonna spend a little less time rolling it out when it's horizontal like this. Just a little bit, enough to compress it, but not enough to really move the clay. Because this time we do want the clay to be longer, because we need it to fit this piece here, and we still need it to get down to this thickness. Always good to keep flipping it over, otherwise you'll get kind of a curled memory, because clay has memory and it remembers how you treat it. And clay holds a grudge. One final pass to make sure that it is the same width as these boards. Now we're going to place our form. We're going to use that same wooden tool, same little bamboo skewer, to cut out our shape. And then you can use the extra on one side to create your coil. So now that we've got this shape, next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna always keep your ribs as clean as you can when doing slab building, because any little speck of clay will create a line. So if you want a nice smooth curve, remember we're going in different directions, right? Now I'm gonna go this way. I'm gonna go along the edges. Now you notice I kind of had to pat this down so it wouldn't come up so much. Sometimes if you pull this way, you'll curl it up, and you don't want that. So just change the direction. And we're gonna flip it over. Now, when you do this, you might accidentally making this a little bit too long, but we can always trim the excess off the cup, so that's not a worry. And remember, you're gonna go gently enough that you're not denting the clay, but firm enough that you're starting to remove the pattern of the canvas. Because once that pattern is removed, the clay has probably been compressed enough. You can go along the edges, We have that nice, smooth surface. Now, once it's nice and smooth on all the edges, there's no more canvas texture. You want to put the smooth side facing up so you can put your mold on here. Now, don't squish it. Careful, it's a heavy enough weight. In the center this ways, but up towards the top a little bit, because you want to pick up that little edge there and make sure it's all touching the clay. Then you're just going to roll it across. And you're going to end up with something like this. Now what I want you to do is I want you to pull it back to where they meet. I want you to make a little score there, right where they meet. Unroll it. This line here is where you want to cut it off, right? Now, when you bring it over here, and you roll it across, it's a lot closer to meeting. Now, you're going to do the same thing on the other side, following that line over. And this is a small enough bit that you can probably do it against the clay mold. You can also roll it out again flat to do this little cut, but I think it works just as well here. So now the two pieces are lined up, right? So now what you want to do is you want to take one edge, the same tool, and you want to score this edge. Remember, it's like a zipper, lots of little teeth marks. All the way up, don't have any gaps. Then you're going to take this other side and you're going to do the same thing. Make sure it's all tore up, right? Nice and rough edges. Then we're going to use the slip. Make sure you get lots of it patted on there. And on this side. Bring the plaster mold in again. Fold up the side where everything is touching, all the way touching. Now we're gonna get to this part here and we're just gonna let them kiss. And then smush on either side until water comes, or the slip smushes out, basically. Don't press too hard, but you'll wanna get a seam like that. Then you're gonna use your rib to smooth that seam down, and it uses the slip for a little bit of extra lubrication. Now you notice the top and bottom are not very even. For the bottom, you're gonna wanna smush this inward so that it's covering the edge of the bottom. See that? Then I'm gonna try and center it in the band wheel. Give it a nice squish. We're gonna use the same tool again, and you're gonna go about a finger width down from the top of the mold, and you're just gonna hold the stick. I'm not moving the stick at all. It's only when I turn the wheel that a line forms. And you want to be gentle so that you don't throw everything off center. And I'm just slowly going around, and every time I go around, I'm pressing just a little bit deeper until you can just guide it through that little path that you've created. Right here, it's just gliding through because it's got that wall on either side. And it's gonna be a lot easier to do by turning the wheel. You'll get a much more stable flat rim by turning the wheel than you will if you try and freehand draw it around. I promise you, you'll get a wiggly top, which if you want a wiggly top for your cup, go for it. There is no wrong way, but if you do it this way, all that just comes off, and you'll use your sponge to just swipe around, and you can just kind of smooth off those edges, right? Don't worry about it being perfect. We are not here to make it perfect, but we do want it to be smooth because sharp edges, the glaze doesn't like sharp edges, and your mouth will not like sharp edges when you try and put this to your face to drink out of it. So once we've got it spun around that way, we're gonna turn it over, and it's okay if it gets stuck a little bit and peels up. That's not a big deal. You can just wipe that stuff away. But you're gonna wanna flip it around. And now we're actually gonna use some scrap pieces. Get it into kind of a semi-pancake-ish shape. I'm gonna roll this way. I'm gonna roll this way, I'm gonna roll this way, pick it up, flip it over, roll this way, turn it, turn it. Perfect. Then, remember, at every stage, clean the rib, and then use the rib to smooth and compress it. Flip it around. Same thing. Lots of different directions. Then, once we've got that nice and round, we're going to take our bottom piece. We're just going to do a little cookie cutter. Bag your scraps. Then you can just use your fingers to pop that out. And this time, I'm gonna have the canvas side down, and we're just gonna score all around the bottom of this. Then we're gonna score around the bottom of this. And you can really be aggressive. You can score down to the plaster. Just don't score on the edges, only on the top. Then we've got our slip. Gonna be generous with that. Try not to get it on the plaster. You only want it on the clay. It will not help to be on the plaster. Okay? Same thing here. Line the zippers up, press it on top, give it a nice, it's okay if it splashes a little. I want that to be really on there. Then, you use your finger to just kind of pull that edge down to smooth it. And this can also be done if you don't want to hold it, because you might get finger marks on it, which can be kind of fun to have your own fingerprints on something you made. But you can also do this on the wheel and just turn as you go. So once you got it looking like that, that's when we're gonna smooth it around with the sponge again. The way we're gonna do that is we're gonna have it mostly centered, and we're just gonna spin it around. You can also wipe downward, which can make some really attractive lines. They may not be deep enough that you will see them through the glaze, but if you wanted to drag your finger down and make little marks, you absolutely can, but I would recommend getting everything nice and smooth before you try to do any kind of carving or stamping or other decorations. So we're just smoothing down all the sides with a damp sponge. Not a wet sponge. It won't really squeeze out anything. It's just damp. And you can also go around. And again, this is another thing where it's a lot easier on the wheel because you can slowly spin it while having your two fingers on top. And as it spins, you can just kind of hold the sponge in one place. But remember, we've got at least a finger's width underneath so we can move the mold around if it falls out of center, right? Then we're gonna do just like we did on the other ones. We're gonna be about a finger's width inside. But look, my little fingerprint, right inside of that. And we're just gonna hold the tool there and spin around. This can also be done on the wheel. And again, you're just gonna have the tool held in one place as the wheel goes around. And it doesn't matter if it's completely perfect because you're just gonna scratch it up anyways. So you've got that all nice and scratched. Then remember, we have this coil here. And we're just gonna, don't press down. We're just finding out what length we need. It's about that much. Then I'm gonna use the same tool again. We're gonna scratch, scratch, scratch. Then we're gonna use the slip so that the zippers glue together. All right, now remember, wet side touching wet side. Now, I usually don't recommend putting it into a circle and then laying on top because it's not really gonna stick. Instead, I like it when you start one in, press it down to where it's attached, and then just go finger length by finger length until you're all the way around. And don't let it twist. Always have the slashy bottom hitting the slashy bottom. Then you're gonna have your little snake where you're gonna press it straight up so that there is no gap where they meet. You have your little snake head and you're gonna remove his head. Then go ahead and smooth that transition. Doesn't have to be perfect. Give it an extra little pat so it's really on there. Then you can use that finger length you have under there to move this around, get it more centered. And we're just gonna do the same thing again, where we turn it. And as we turn it, and you can turn the piece itself, or you can turn the banding wheel, or you can have it spin on the pottery wheel. But either way, you're gonna press on either side so that the coil is forced to pass through your fingers and the sponge. And as it does that, it smooths it and it makes it into more of a perfect circle. You're just gonna wanna keep going around and around until there's no gap, until everything is squished down. Now that we've got it as smooth as we want it, we can add a stamp or write a message on the bottom. And same as before, we're gonna press this on the top, except this time we're gonna have a little bit bigger of a support. So I've got them sandwiched between these two pieces of wood. Gonna flip that over and then gently press little tap, just a little tap tap, just to make sure that the cup is level. It's standing up straight. You can actually use a level if you want. That way you know that it's flat down and straight, and then you will have it dry this way. Now we've got our plate and it's been drying on the mold for a little bit. We're gonna flip it over, put it down, and then just lift that right out. And once we get it free from the mold, we're gonna use the banding wheel again. Try and get it center. Have a wet sponge. Not too wet, not sopping wet, just a little damp. And we're just gonna smooth that edge. But there we have our plate. Now, after either drying until soft leather hard, or you can use a heat gun for 1 minute evenly across. You're just gonna spin it round while I'm using my thumb right here on the edge to just very gently pull until there's a slight gap. Just see that little black line? That's all you need. Don't pull a lot or you'll deform the rim. You just want there to be a little bit of wiggle room all the way around. You can either lift up this way or turn it over and kind of have your 2 fingers here to protect it, 1 finger here, lift up with the thumb. It breaks that suction. Now you might notice that you've got some very messy rim edges here. So we're just gonna stick this back on the banding wheel. Get a sponge, wet but not dripping. There we go. And just gently slide around. Now, if you have any little finger marks or nail marks, you can just smooth those away. Same thing with this one, where there was a nail mark. I'm just gonna smooth back and forth until it's gone. So it's important to be very gentle with the rim. You don't wanna squeeze and you don't wanna press because you don't wanna deform this rim. You just want to get all the edges gone. You want a nice, smooth rim. A good way to do that is to have one finger on either side, just drag it across. After a couple passes with the sponge, you're gonna have a nice, smooth rim. If you wanna smooth the inside a little bit, and there you have it. Now, the hardest one to get off the hump mold is going to be the cup, right? What you wanna do is I like to use, either let it dry for a while or use a heat gun all the way around it evenly for 2 minutes so that it's, whichever way you do it, get it to about leather hard, like a soft leather hard. Then use your finger to kind of curl over, or your thumb to pull until you get that gap all the way around. Try not to squeeze too hard because you don't want to crack it, but you want a gap all the way around. And once you have that gap, I'm going to show you guys something really cool. We're going to use compressed air, and it just pops it right out every time. Then you can see at the bottom there, you might want to use a little bit of slip to just kind of smooth that bottom out. Just going to use a little bit of slip with the paintbrush and just make circles until it's all smooth on the inside. Then we're going to do the same thing we did with the bowl, where we dip our sponge in water, but it's not dripping wet, it's just soggy. And we're just gonna go around the rim until we get all those sharp lines gone and it's nice and smooth. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. You want something unique, and don't be afraid to make a few little mistakes. If there's any other areas on the inside, like this seam line right here, you can just go ahead and use the paintbrush to smooth that out. No seam line. And there you have it. And the nice thing about this set is it can be fired all stacked inside of it for the bisque firing, not for the glaze firing, but for the bisque firing, it saves you some space.